Welcome back to our channels, Warriors. We are still growing. If you haven't had your prima smash that subscribe button, go ahead and have her smash it right now. This episode right here is going to be about something that I haven't spoke on up until this date. It's like, man, Hector, you've been on YouTube for a few months now, right? And I ain't ever heard you talk about the Bloods or the Crips. Why is that, Hector? What's going on? Do they even exist? Or, oh, man. Hey, all right. So as I'm coming out here, right, I'm gonna tell you from my perspective, right? I did 16 years in the California Department of Corrections regarding the Bloods and the Crips. Yes, they existed. They were definitely in there for sure, 100%. Okay. They were down with the business. Don't get it twisted. They're there, right? The thing is, I never grasped the concept of what exactly was going on, okay? Now, again, this is my perspective, right? I don't have any experience. Well, I don't have any experience with gangs in general, right? But from my observations, the Bloods and the Crips were always fighting each other, right? Always going at it. Now, mind you, I was only at two prisons, Centinela and Donovan, right? But at both of them, the Bloods and the Crips were always fighting each other, right? Like constant in-house fighting. It was like normal, right? And normal to them, not normal to me. I couldn't grasp that concept, and there's a lot of gangs within those two organizations. Yeah, I'll call them, they're organizations, right? Bloods and Crips. There's so many. You got the Skyline, you got Piru, you got the Rolling 60s, think Rolling 20s and Rolling 40s, Long Beach, you got Pomona. I mean, there is so many, right? Like your boy could not keep track, right? And they operate different than the Southerners and the whites, right? They operate like being a Southern Hispanic, you cannot necessarily get in a cell fight with your own cellmate without asking for permission, right? You gotta ask the people above you, is it okay if I fight this guy in the cell? Or even something as like a one-on-one, right? Two inmates fighting each other. You gotta ask for permission. When it came to the Bloods and the Crips, it was not like every man for themselves, but almost like, hey, if I have a problem with this dude, we're going to catch a fade, right? We're going to go in this blind spot over here. We're going to do our thing, but constant. Code 2s, all right? Code 2s. Sometimes code 3s, but there's different levels to disruptions in a prison system, right? Code 3 being the maximum riot, right? All hell has broken loose. We need everybody from everywhere, okay? So I say code 2s because it would always be approximately, give or take, right? From my experience, it would be like probably anywhere between 3-on-3 fights, like 4-on-4, 6-on-6, like 8-and-8, like, right? Like, man, almost like normal program, right? Often, would I say often enough for me to realize, like, it was too much, right? Too much to, maybe there's a method behind the madness. I don't know. Maybe they know what they're doing, okay? Like, but fights in general or stabbings, I don't see how those can be beneficial, right? Beneficial to the business, to the organization, right? Anytime there's kind of violence, it kind of offsets or disrupts the program. So, wow. Did I interact with them? Yeah, I interacted with them. It was the gang, I mean, gangs were never really brought forth and foremost, right? Like, oh, hey, I'm part of this gang. This is what I'm about. That never was like the conversations had. It was more so like amongst us, amongst Green, right? If I got to a new yard or something, they would say, oh, that's a shot caller for the Crips. That's the shot caller for the Bloods. And then that's how that conversation would be had, right? Because they were, the shot callers were respectful. They'd been around. They know what's up, right? Kind of OGs. So that's how those conversations had. A lot of those conversations with those individuals was the same. It was cool because if somebody messed up, right, on their side, if a youngster messed up, they would be the first ones to kind of reach out and be like, that's going to get handled. We're going to handle that. So that was cool, right? It's like, hey, man, just handle problems. Problems need to go away, right? Anywhere. Problems should not be problems, right? On any side. So, yeah, and people get out of line. People get disrespectful. People make mistakes. But either way, like, hey, that could, I've already told you guys, that a little spark can ignite the whole thing, right? The whole barrel. And that was my experience. How was I able to identify them? By their lingo, right? Blood, cuz, swoop. Swoop was a big one, right? Especially coming up in Centinela. Happy C-Day, cuz. Right now, and I'll joke around like on Green side. You guys don't see these texts because you ain't seen texts that are going out to the homies, right? Or you shouldn't be on Green side. But yeah, if it was like one of our birthdays, we would shoot a text like happy C-Day, cuz, right? But all that we're getting from in there, right? Talk about institutionalized, but that's Blood and Crips, right? I was not part of the violence in the 1990s and early 2000s. I was not part of that violence, especially at Calipatria State Prison, or Centinela in that time frame. But I've heard from our peers that those East Coast Crips were not to be messed with, right? Not stabbing COs left and right, stabbing sergeants, stabbing lieutenants, just stabbing everybody up, right? I don't even know the reasoning behind that. I don't know, but it didn't sound cool, right? Getting stabbed never sounds like a great idea or fun, right? But yeah, for sure. Whoever the East Coast Crips were then, or maybe even now, I don't know. That's the thing. They have that reputation for sure. At least with me, in my mind, they have that reputation. Like, oh, these dudes were just stabbing people left and right, like cops. Like, wow. Right, that's not to say that the other races didn't do the same. They did, right? But we're talking about the Bloods and the Crips here, right? The B's and the C's. The red and the blue. Would they fight with knives? Would they riot with knives against each other, Hector? No, not necessarily. From my perspective, right? Maybe in other institutions, maybe High Desert, they're stabbing the crap out of each other. Tehachapi, Salinas Valley, possibly. I don't know. I wasn't there. But where I was at, mostly fist fights. Let me see, pepper spray. We use pepper spray. Batons probably 40 millimeter less lethal to quell it, right? To stop the violence. Lockdowns, long lockdowns wouldn't even necessarily ensue after those because it was kind of like, oh, they're at it again. I on the streets don't even know the dynamics of like neighborhoods. Grape Street Crips, right? Jordan Downs, Watts. That did grab my attention when I was new. The Michael Jordan that was upside down. Right, Jordan Downs project. I know about that because it caught my attention and I researched it, right? Your boy's gonna do research to try to figure out what's going on around here, right? What are these guys up to? Why are they looking at me like that? But yeah, man, that's my experience with the Bloods and the Crips. I never thankfully, thank God, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Thank God they didn't have that reputation where if one goes, they all go. Meaning, if I'm doing a pat down on an inmate, a closed body search, and I find a weapon, right? They didn't necessarily have that rule where they have to use that weapon on you like the other races. Or if you take that individual down in the process of that inmate resisting, the thought process or the fear of getting stomped out or rushed wasn't there like that, like with the other races, right? Or Southern Hispanics. Let's keep it real. There's a common knowledge that if you take down a Southern Hispanic, or if you get into it, right, like a tussle, you're gonna get mopped up. You're gonna get with dealing with that, the Bloods and the Crips. For the most part, and I appreciate that we didn't get jumped in that capacity, right? Through my experience. But, yeah, man, they're not to be taken lightly. They're not, I mean, they fight. They're fighting all the time. And I could never grasp that, right? With that being said, the message for today is like fighting. Fighting is, I'm not going to say it's pointless, but it is kind of pointless, right? It should always be a last resort, right? Like if we're talking about violent environments, right? So, man, the pen is mightier than the sword, right? But you're not going to not write up your fellow Crip or your Blood. But you get what I'm saying, man. Communication. Democracy through communication. Keep pushing forward.